Hi, everybody, and welcome to If These Heels Can Talk. My name is Michelle, and I'm with Bad Cat Digital.
And good morning in our case. And this is JoyGenea with Solutions by JoyGenea. So, Michelle, start us off with today's topic.
Well,
please.
as always, we are improving the topic.
Well,
Because
somewhat.
it's a topic about unplanned collaboration. So
we couldn't
we
plan.
needed to not plan what we were going to talk
And
about
it was
today.
a little challenging. Like we sat down and I wanted to
It's
ask,
not just
so
an
tell me
excuse because
more.
we were so busy this week that we didn't have time to plan
But
it.
normally we at least have a 5 to 10 minute.
Yeah, and we
Google-a-thon
didn't.
and
Yeah,
talk a little
we
bit
didn't.
and-
Yeah, we do some really deep research, but
every once in a while, actually.
every once in a while.
Yep.
Yeah, mostly
I make
you.
the infograph.
Yep.
And I
Yeah,
get
yeah,
into
you
it,
do the things.
But not this one.
Nope, because
No.
we're going to talk about unplanned collaboration. And this actually came up because somebody asked me, why did I bother with a building?
Oh.
So we have a business that is digital. Everybody could technically work remotely. We could work through Slack and Zoom calls.
Well, and look at all the companies that are currently
and there's a
doing that.
ton of companies that are moving into that direction.
Right.
So why bother?
Right.
Why invest in a building, especially right now, and why bother?
Mhm.
So the reason is because of unplanned collaboration. That's what I talk to people about, because here's the thing. When everybody's remote, then every conversation is intentional, meaning every conversation has to be thought through. There's no opportunity for somebody to be walking by somebody's desk and see what's on their computer and say, oh, that triggered a thought in me.
Oh,
There's no opportunity for the spark.
Oh,
Yeah,
creative
the
spark.
hey, what are you working on? That's a great idea. Hey, do you have 5 minutes? Can I just talk to you about something I'm working on? And maybe there's something we can take from this and put in that.
So I knew you were intentional about the building.
Yes.
And so forth. Was that? I know you were looking at buildings prior
Yes.
to
Yes.
the stuff that happens in 2019.
2020.
2020.
Yeah.
Like prior to
The
2020.
stuff.
The stuff. But did that change the kind of building you were looking at, what you were looking for?
It didn't, but it did solidify and inform the kind of design for the building that I wanted. The way that the building is laid out is very intentional with what I call away spaces. So spaces that people can pick up their laptop, walk away from their desk and go somewhere else and continue to work. So we have small meeting rooms that are for 2 or 3 people, and they're really not comfortable for more than that.
They're not. No, it is
but they're very comfortable for 2 people.
Yes.
Because they're small in footprint. They're, intimate spaces. I mean, they have windows and all, whatever, but they're small spaces, meaning we have a space that's completely private with no windows. That's, so people can have really, they can feel really safe having really big discussions.
Mhm.
We have space by this beautiful southern exposure wall that we call the sunroom, that's got a couch and chairs and a big TV, but then it's also got bean bags and this, it's about moving and getting out of your little desk space.
Well, and when I walk through the space and so forth, I see that a lot.
People are actively using those spaces.
In all, because I wondered about that.
Yep.
I'll admit it. I'm like,
Yep.
yeah, let's see how much this gets used. But
Right.
it really, I'm impressed with how much it does.
There's a lot of kind of stand up, really fast, short conversations and meeting times. When everybody's remote, you have to schedule things. You have to be really intentional with them. And there's nothing wrong with that. You want an agenda for a meeting. You want a purpose. Otherwise, it should be an email.
But everybody will, I think this is clear. Everybody will tell you remote working is different than in-person working.
Right.
Just like teachers would tell you in-person teaching was very different than remote teaching. Like they're just very different
and they
things.
exercise different muscles, and they take advantage of different things, and different people gravitate toward one or the other. And we that collaborative and creative culture, it's possible to do remotely. It's absolutely possible. There's a lot of businesses doing it successfully, but most of them are very large.
Yes.
And they have individuals with very specific and very consistent job job duties,
Yes.
job functions. And larger teams can do that. You can silo your functions a little bit differently because you have so many people. But a small company, we need people to be really flexible and nimble and, moving from one thing to the next. And it's just so much faster and easier to do when you're in the same space.
How has the team embraced that?
Well, what's interesting is, for so many other companies, there was this big conversation after the pandemonium,
Yes.
or pancake breakfast
After 2020.
Yes, after 2020 of coming back,
Right.
or not.
Right.
And we didn't have that. I talked with the team and I said, do you want to come back?
Right.
Decide.
And
If you want to come back, come back. If you're not comfortable coming back yet, then don't come back yet.
Mhm.
And within, I would say it wasn't like right away. Some people took a little bit of time to,
I think like society in general.
People,
there's just
a little
just
reentry.
Like there's early adapters.
There were a couple of people who were like, "Oh my God, get me out of my house." And then
Right.
there were a couple of people that were like, "I'm going to maybe take it a little slower." And then there was one person who was home for almost a year.
Mhm.
And by the time that person came back, the rest of the team could feel the difference in their absence.
Oh, yeah.
And it wasn't that they were being excluded. It wasn't that they weren't included in meetings. It wasn't about that. It was that spontaneous conversation, that collaboration,
chemistry,
the connection.
Mm.
You have to be so intentional about that when everybody's remote. And when everybody's in the same physical space, it just kind of naturally happens.
Yeah.
So for better or for worse,
Yes.
if there's somebody kind of toxic running around, it's going to be toxic connections without intention.
Yep.
And so for better or for worse, right? It just kind of naturally happens when people are in physical space together.
I think what I would add to this conversation, so coaching people through 2020 and 2021 and so forth, especially people neurodiverse, it went in two directions.
Mm-hmm.
Like for one group of people, oh my gosh, to be home and to be able to put down all of the social pressures of an office,
Yes.
and all that was huge for them, and they are not going back. Like they now said, I work remotely, I need a structured environment, and I want to have that kind of
control over my
Yes.
environment. Yeah.
And they're like, and I'm so much more productive. Like it was amazing. A couple of their
Because for
bosses
the-
were like, you are so amazingly productive. They're like,
For that
"I'm not."
person, the constant interruptions of unplanned collaboration
Yes.
are incredibly disruptive.
Right. It was just, and their boss really wanted them to come back, and they said it would require like a soundproof booth pretty much,
Right.
with no window. They're like, I need, like,
Yeah.
I have to.
And by the way, those exist. They're
do.
selling these kind of like small
it's like an
office
pod thing.
things that look like large phone booths. I think they look like little person jail cells,
people
but
like
other
them.
people really like them.
And I would tell you, a couple of my clients would really love that.
Yeah.
And there was another group of my clients that the second they were in college, a couple of them, some of them were at work, and the second they went remote and it was all video, we just worked on strategies so they could focus while sitting on video,
Right.
because they couldn't, like, it was so not, they're like, I need the energy of the other people. Like that unplanned collaboration, like they needed all of that engagement.
You need the buzz.
Yeah,
you know,
they need the
you
buzz,
know the
feed.
difference when you walk into a restaurant at 3:00 in the afternoon when nothing's going on,
Yes.
and you walk into a restaurant at 5:30 and there's this there's this hum, there's this buzz happening in the background.
Yeah.
And some people would rather go at 3,
Mhm.
and some people would rather go at 6. And there's nothing wrong with either.
Right.
And so, like, the flexibility as an organization, the flexibility to be able to accommodate both is incredibly important.
Well, and then there's this balance in the middle. So for those that were struggling, I worked on pairing them with people
Sure.
that so they didn't feel as isolated.
Sure.
Like one college student, they were at their dorms, right? But they're
Yep.
all in their own rooms.
Yep.
I'm like, why don't you ask some of your teammates, if like your classmates, if they would like to meet at the library because library's open. I'm like, and you guys could at least like sit in rooms next to each other. So they did.
Yeah.
So it meant that every day they left their dorm room. They
Yeah.
went
You
over
get up,
there,
you get showered, you get dressed,
they
you
did
know,
things. They
yeah.
needed some schedule.
I really struggled with remote work. And so this is not a reflection. I think probably
everybody's personality is different.
I think probably my attitude toward remote work may be a bit of a reflection of how I feel I perform remotely. But at the same time, you know, I'm able to distance myself from it enough to know that there are other people out there who perform very differently in different environments, and everybody's a little bit different. I think that there are opportunities to set up a structure that allows for, you know, for the first hour, the whole team remote will be on the same camera, on the same Zoom, not really in a meeting,
basically co-working space,
but available to co-work with each other if they have a problem. There are techniques and tactics like that can plan for the unplanned collaboration. It's just so much easier.
When they're physically there.
You just don't have to anticipate the need for it. And the thing is that there's a massive need for it, especially for those in creative spaces.
I was just gonna say in creative, like I can't imagine Pixar working all remotely. Like it would, you know, I know they have to feed off of each other.
Well, and that's the thing, like when you have the opportunity, you can plan the design stages, or you can plan the collaborative phases. You can plan all of those things. But you can't plan the walking past somebody's desk and seeing something. You can't plan that.
No.
That's a kismet, a serendipitous moment that can only happen accidentally. And the thing is that it happens enough to make it worth trying to work around. My mind.
That's a really good conversation. I think that businesses need to consider for each, because I don't know that that's one thing I'm kind of noticing right now is it's a one size fits all. Well, and to make it easier for leadership, they're like, okay, everybody's working remotely.
And the conversation isn't what is the business case for this or this. That's not the conversation. No. The conversation is it easier for me to manage my teams this way or this way? And that is not the right conversation to be having.
I can understand why you get there.
Absolutely.
Like, I just want to respect the fact that after the last couple of years, I can see how you get there.
Of course.
But if you're going to also then share that you're having struggles getting employees, I can tell you one of those issues is employees now have tasted a variety of things and they know themselves better. Right. Honestly, they know themselves better. And so they want
every conscientious, healthy adult wants to perform. They want to do the work well. There is nobody out there. There are people out there trying to game the system. Of course there are. There are people out there trying to game every system.
Right.
But you know what? The vast majority of people are not there to take advantage of something. The vast majority of people are honestly saying, I perform better this way. Can you allow for my higher performance? Can you value that? Can you value my opinion about myself, my self-awareness? And when you want high performers, you want people who are self-aware. You want people who understand the larger picture. You want people who understand how they fit into it. And if you want all of that, but then you won't listen to them about themselves, you're not going to get it.
Well, they're going to leave. It's really
and you're not going to get it.
You're going to have a high turnover rate. And you'll be like, why is this happening? Because you aren't hearing.
Yeah. You're not listening.
Right. You're not listening to the greater conversation.
Yes.
So I think one thing that's coming out of this that I would encourage everybody is to be listening to that conversation. And also, I do think it's what I'm noticing in managers of some of my clients and what I'm encouraging them is to start a more vulnerable conversation about what they need. And having that communication, because managers don't really want to train more people. That's what I keep reminding them. I'm like, really? They're kind of
Do you really want to train people?
And you're a great employee. If I thought they weren't in the right job, I wouldn't recommend this. But right now, the ones I am recommending this for, they're great. They're great in their jobs. They like where they're working. So I'm like, okay, this gets down to you learning to communicate more.
Yes.
And your manager, let's find out and push the quality of your manager. And it turns out all of them have great managers that want to keep them. So I'm like, okay, you need to communicate that one in particular needs that collaboration time.
Yep.
Every day we're like his whole team gets on Zoom and they're all just there. The cameras
just
can
work.
even be off, but the mics are on. And so somebody will be mumbling.
Yeah. So you get the buzz, right? You don't feel so isolated and alone. You don't feel like the zombie apocalypse could be happening outside of your door and you'd never know.
Right. And then when it comes time to ask more questions, what I've watched and observed in particular with one client is as he had questions about projects he was working on stuff, all of a sudden he asked them in the moment. Like he was sitting around with the team. And so he would ask them, oh, I got stuck on this. Oh yeah, I tried this. And he's just like, I'm able to solve I'm not
just like you would if you were like, hey, Jan, I need the thing. Like that's.
Well, and people would see in an office.
Yes.
That your friend, like people would.
Yep.
Yes.
So when we think about unplanned collaboration or really any sort of unplanned kind of setting that up takes intention. Yes. I think about the disaster of WeWork, but I think about what their intention was behind WeWork, and it was disastrous from a company perspective. And there's all kinds of things there.
That's a different thing.
That's a different conversation. But the intention, the design, the philosophy of designing space that will actually bring people together. It takes on concepts of city planning, municipal design, wayfinding, these kinds of concepts, and it turns them into how are we going to create space for serendipity? We talked about this when we talked about creativity a little bit.
Oh yeah.
It's not just a flash in the pan. You can make it much more likely to happen by setting the stage appropriately. So you can make your creative process much more impactful and much more consistent and much more repeatable.
Yes.
If you set the space correctly. But the same thing is true for collaboration. The same thing is true for those moments when your team comes together and creates something that is past what anybody planned for.
Oh, I love those moments.
And they are few and far between, but they're incredibly valuable, and they make people feel so good when they're able to do it. So it's just setting the stage for that, I think, is really, really important. And whether it's remote or in person, being really intentional about that. I think it takes more work remotely. Personally, I just do. But setting the stage for that, I think, is really vital, especially for smaller organizations.
So make sure you're checking your business and getting the pulse on that type of thing. And if you're not getting the creative things out of your group, and you're
it's starting to feel like people are so stuck in their own minds and in their own ways, it's because they physically and literally are.
Thank you for joining us on If These Heels Could Talk. We hope we've enlightened you a little or given you something to talk about. We're pretty sure you at least had a laugh with us somewhere in this conversation. We somehow said something like, what? And we're glad. So thanks for joining us. And we hope you're able to catch our next broadcast.